ladies and gentlemen, this is DVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. The war in Ukraine has always been about territory, symbols, and survival. But lately, it has become about something else as well: fuel. Not just metaphorical fuel for Kremlin's propaganda machine, but the literal gasoline and diesel that keeps its war economy running. And increasingly, Ukraine is showing that it can take that fuel away. Ukraine's drones are reaching deeper into Russia than Moscow ever thought possible. It is turning oil refineries into fireballs, fuel stations into ghost towns, and Russia's previous energy superpower into something closer to a Lada with no gas on the side of the highway. So, without further ado, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
Fuel shortages are spreading across Russia as Ukrainian drone strikes continue to target key oil infrastructure. Independent fuel stations in the central and southern regions are reporting outages of popular gasoline grades, and in some cases, rationing has been introduced. Ukraine has intensified its campaign against Russian oil refineries, aiming to cripple military logistics and reduce revenues from energy exports. The attacks have focused on distillation columns, critical components of refinery operations, causing long-term damage and significantly reducing output. While diesel remains available, gasoline production has dropped below domestic demand. Prices have also gone up to more than €2 per litre. Privately owned fuel stations, which make up around 40% of the market, are struggling to maintain operations due to high interest rates and limited access to supply. Some regional Russian officials downplay the crisis, attributing the shortages to temporary supply chain issues. However, the broader economic impact is becoming more visible, with rising bankruptcies and declining exports amid ongoing Western sanctions.
And now, let's zone in on the east-planning portion of our show. Russia's oil and gas sector is under growing strain as Ukrainian strikes cripple critical infrastructure. With refining capacity slashed and storage options limited, experts warn that production cuts may be inevitable.
Russia's oil and gas sector, long the backbone of its federal budget, is facing mounting pressure as Ukrainian drone strikes continue to target refineries and export terminals. The attacks have damaged at least 10 refineries and key Baltic Sea ports, temporarily cutting refining capacity by nearly 20%. Oil and gas revenues have historically contributed between one-third and one-half of Russia's federal income, making the sector vital to financing government operations and military efforts. The recent strikes, including one on the major Primorsk oil port, have disrupted exports and forced temporary shutdowns. Primorsk alone handles over 1 million barrels of oil per day, more than 10% of Russia's total output. Russian authorities have remained largely silent on the extent of the damage. President Volodymyr Zelensky, meanwhile, has called the strikes the sanctions that work the fastest, highlighting their strategic impact on Russia's war financing.
And now, let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. In recent weeks, Kyiv has intensified its campaign against Russian energy infrastructure, and the strikes are leaving burn marks not just on Russian refineries, but on the entire illusion of Moscow's energy invulnerability. Take the Salavat petrochemical complex in Bashkortostan, one of Russia's largest. It's over 1,500 kilometers from the front lines. Ukrainian drones hit it real hard on Wednesday. Videos show thick columns of black smoke rising from the facility, while local officials scrambled to reassure residents that emergency services had all under control, which is another way of saying no, they didn't. But Salavat is just one name on an ever-expanding list. According to the Financial Times, 16 out of Russia's 38 oil refineries have been struck since early August. That's nearly half. Some were hit multiple times. Now, this has disrupted refining capacity over 1 million barrels per day, more than the entire daily oil consumption of Germany. In turn, Russian diesel exports have dropped to their lowest levels since 2020. This is not a minor adjustment. This is a structural problem for a state that relies on fossil fuel like an addict clings to their last cigarette. And inside Russia, the strain is beginning to show. Reports from Crimea describe gas stations running dry. Drivers complain about closed pumps, long queues, or stations simply shutting down. For Crimeans, this isn't just a shortage, it's literal deja vu. They lived through it in 2014 when Moscow promised stability and delivered scarcity. Now once again, their loyalty is being rewarded with empty gas tanks. Meanwhile, in mainland Russia, the government insists there's no shortage. They say domestic demand is more than covered. And technically that is true. Russia produces far more diesel than it consumes, but the sanctions and Ukrainian drones are making it harder to export. And those exports are where the big money lies. Without them, Moscow's revenue shrinks, its currency suffers, and its ability to finance the war weakens. It's no wonder some in Russia are floating the idea of a complete ban on diesel exports by the end of the year. Petrol exports are already banned and diesel may be next, which would amount to a stunning admission that Ukraine, with its drones and its persistence, has managed to push the world's largest country into energy retreat. Ukraine has forced the issue in a way that speeches and sanctions alone could not. By physically knocking out Russian refining capacity, it is creating shortages, raising costs, and pushing Moscow into uncomfortable choices. Export less and you lose revenue, export more and you risk domestic unrest. In the end, Russia may not be defeated by tanks or treaties, but by the very thing it once sold the world, oil that now burns on its own soil. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Sławomir Rajewski, Senior Oil and Gas Lecturer from University of London. Hello, sir, and welcome to Eastern Express.
Thank you for having me.
So there's various reports coming out saying that Russia is now having oil issues, and I'm hoping they can help us paint a picture of how, to what extent is this situation over there?
Yes, currently there are reports, particularly in the press in the West, that there is an issue with supply of refined products in Russia. This apparently is as a result of strikes on Russia's refining capacity, as well as pipelines inside of the Russia as part of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And what we know from the messages that we are getting is that the price, particularly in the southwest part of Russia, the prices are going up as a result of shortages of the supply. So this is very much linked to whether infrastructure is, but also it is also linked to the fact that prices are going up because of those activities, military activities.
All right, so is this something that it could be fixed in a short span of time, these infrastructure? Are they going to be able to replace them anytime soon? Or are we going to see the situation being more exacerbated as the time goes on?
There's a very interesting development because only a few days ago, we have witnessed a kind of, if you like, a change, because previously the infrastructure that was under attack was largely sort of, if you like, not that important for the process of refining. But at the moment, we are witnessing possibly a new strategy of Ukrainian military forces that it's targeting possibly the refining capacity that probably might be difficult to restore. We don't really know that because there's very little information from the Russian sources, and the information that we are relying on are largely from the Ukrainian sources and the Western sources. So, of course, it's difficult to really understand what's happening on the ground. But what is known is that the products, the prices of products are going up. And this suggests that the supply has been interrupted. And of course, we're talking about part of Russia where pretty much all the outlets for oil are located. If you look at the map of political economy of oil in Russia, both the northwest of Russia, sort of the area of St. Petersburg, and the southwest of Russia, if you like, the Black Sea region. These are the places where most of the outlets are located.
All right, so like you mentioned, we can probably insinuate that the Ukrainian side of the reports are probably more accurate, seeing that the price have been going up, showcasing that something is going on there indeed. Do you think that this is going to impact Russia's war coffers enough that it's going to see some sort of change in the front lines?
Well, this is a very interesting question. Of course, this is purely a speculation because we don't know what has really happened on the ground, and also we don't know what will happen. But for sure, looking at by the looks of it, we're talking about very important export facilities. We're talking about Primorsk, we're talking about Usluga in the northwest, and also we're talking about Chasiaris and Novorossiysk in the south. So these are the key export facilities of Russian oil. What we also see here is that once the refining capacity is destroyed, there is a potential for, if you like, implosion of the pipeline system. We also heard from the Russian oil pipeline company Transneft that they are experiencing problems. This is the company that's responsible for shipment of oil. So they control and they operate oil pipelines. They kind of oversee transmission pipelines within Russia. So essentially what happens is that if the refining capacity is damaged, then oil is not required, but oil is being produced. Crude oil is being produced. And of course, the question is how to manage the pressure that is on the transmission system and how the transmission system company is capable, is able to sort of keep this process ongoing. So there's a potential here. What I see here, I mean, this is again purely speculation, but what is possible should this destruction of refining capacity continue, then there's a potential for upstream impacts as well, because there will be no possibility to accommodate this oil in the pipelines. There's so this is something serious by the looks of it, definitely.
Right. Will this paradoxically affect countries that are buying crude from Russia, seeing that they don't have the production capacity to refine these oil, and actually somehow causing the prices to go down on a country that's been buying Russian crude?
Well, this is a spot-on point because, in the past year or so, there's been a discussion about how to put economic sanctions on Russia. And we know that it's very difficult in principle to put economic sanctions on other countries, particularly in the context of changing geopolitics of oil and gas supply, if you wish. If you look at traditional suppliers of Russian oil, traditional the destinations for Russian oil supply, Europe, this is less the case, but Europe obviously still buys Russian oil. But we see India as the major kind of buyer of Russian oil in the past few years. India wasn't major receiver of Russian oil, but it is now. So what we see is that the damaged infrastructure, particularly the infrastructure in the Black Sea, is likely to reduce their export capacity to places like India and also to Turkey. So is this going to have an impact? Possibly. It may have impact on ability of Russian companies to export oil to these new markets, if you like, established in the past few years.
And how does that directly or indirectly impact the day-to-day lives and people are using these oil? How does that affect the prices at the pump?
Well, if you look at the prices based on the information we have, we know that the prices have, in some places, have doubled. We also need to remember that Russia is a big country, and Russia has sort of local, regional markets almost. So in other words, prices differ across the country. So if you in the Far East, the prices tend to be higher because of the cost of transportation. But here we also have this phenomenon of rising prices because of the destruction, because of damage and shortage of supply. Let's not forget about a very important thing. Oil and particularly refined products are used not only by consumers like us, ordinary people, but also by the military. So I think that it's worth keeping in mind that the military is always the priority when it comes to supply of refined products. And therefore, if there is any shortage, this shortage will have to be, if you like, absorbed by ordinary consumers, but definitely the military has to have continued supply of oil or refined products.
And do we know where most of these kind of drought is being kind of experienced right now within Russia?
Well, mostly based on the reports that we have seen, it's mostly in the southwest of Russia, so the territory right next to the Ukraine, but also in the northwest of Russia. So we tend to see this happening in the western part of the country, which, by the way, is obviously the most important part of Russia when it comes to economy.
And I'm also curious whether or not this is going to have any sort of ripple effect, seeing that, well, energy has been one of Russia's, if not the biggest exports that they have, and they have been using that as kind of their geopolitical chess piece. Now, with that being severely impacted, can you see this having essentially, like I mentioned, a ripple effect across kind of their geopolitical standing, or even to the extent that we might see a shift or winds of change when it comes to this war?
This is a very big question. We don't know that. I have to say, obviously, this is something at the intersection between markets and security. But, purely from the market point of view, if there is no supply, then obviously the market suffers. And if there's, and obviously oil is very important. If you look at the dependence on diesel, for instance, transportation, food sector, agriculture. This has always impact on various sectors of the economy. So I think that we have seen, when it comes coming back to the point of economic sanctions, we've seen a lot of pressure on, if you like, the top-down approach pressure, right? So we've seen pressure on importing nations, and it hasn't really got. We haven't gone far with this pressure because obviously the importers are not willing to stop importing. But now we have sort of down to top approach. It seems to me where there is an attempt to disrupt the supply of refined products, but also this may have effect of on transmission companies in Russia and potentially on producers. And of course, the question is of the export. Obviously, export is very important because export secures revenues. And of course, there might be a difficult decision whether to prioritize supply onto the domestic market versus exports that generate the revenues. So we shall see the developments, what is coming next. But by the looks of it, it seems to me that things are intensifying, and we are seeing more sort of brave, if you like, response from the Ukrainian side. So by the looks of it, we're not going. It's probably going to have some effect.
Right. Thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us on Eastern Express.
Thank you.
Cheers. And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. A new bill in Ukraine has sparked alarm among journalists and media watchdogs, who warn that it could pave the way for censorship. Though framed as a human rights initiative, critics say it threatens press freedom and investigative reporting.
Ukrainian lawmakers introduced a bill proposing changes to the civil code that could redefine how personal rights intersect with media freedom. While not directly targeting journalists, the bill allows individuals to seek moral compensation for criticism, label unconfirmed information as false, and demand removal of content deemed outdated or irrelevant, terms left undefined. Media experts argue the bill could lead to prior censorship and legal pressure on journalists. Investigative reporting, especially on corruption, may be stifled unless backed by court rulings. Members of the media fear a pattern of legislative attempts to restrict press freedom, recalling a failed 2024 bill that proposed prison for sharing confidential information.
Ukraine's bold 2024 incursion into Russia's Kursk region is now under scrutiny, as former Commander Valery Zaluzhny calls its cost too high. His remarks contrast sharply with official claims of success based on Russian casualties.
In August 2024, Ukraine launched a surprise cross-border offensive into Russia's Kursk region, capturing 1,300 square kilometers in a bid to divert Russian forces and prevent an invasion of Sumy. The operation, led by Alexander Syrsky, was hailed for its scale and shock value, but its strategic value remains contested. Russia, bolstered by 12,000 North Korean troops, mounted a counteroffensive that reclaimed most of the territory. Zaluzhny, now Ukraine's ambassador to the UK, criticized the campaign's long-term effectiveness, arguing that narrow tactical gains rarely yield lasting successes.
Facing a growing budget deficit, Russia's finance ministry has proposed raising value-added tax from 20% to 22% to fund defense and security. The move reflects mounting economic pressure from the war in Ukraine and failing oil revenues.
Russia unveiled a draft budget that includes a VAT hike aimed at sustaining wartime spending. While essential goods like food and medicine will retain a reduced 10% rate, the general increase is expected to generate billions in additional revenue starting January 2026. The proposal also introduces new taxes on bookmakers and betting operations, part of a broader effort to stabilize the economy. Experts say the Kremlin is running out of options, with pension cuts, salary reductions, and even bank account freezes being considered. With VAT already contributing 37% of Russia's 2024 budget, the increase could significantly reduce the 2026 shortfall, though at a cost to consumers and businesses.
And that's all for this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.